Hey guys, my name is Marshall McGee. I am a game sound designer and host of the YouTube series Waveform, and I'm here with Pro Sound Effects today to show you some cool sound design and workflow techniques. I'll be designing some spaceship sounds using the Core Standard library from Pro Sound Effects. If you're unfamiliar with Core Standard, it's quite an impressive collection of sounds from both general and specialty libraries, including some sounds from award-winning sound designers like Mark Mangini and Richard King. It's extremely well organized and has all the content that a sound designer would hope for and expect in a high-quality sample library like this one. I also want to mention that this library comes with Search, which is Pro Sound Effects' library management and search software. We'll talk a little bit more about that soon, but in the meantime, let's just dive right in and start talking about the video we'll be designing to. Alright, so this is the scene that I've chosen for us to design to today. It's a scene from Star Wars Episode 7. I'll play it a couple times through right now with no sound, just so you guys can, for example, listen in your own head and see what you'd like to hear in this kind of a clip. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is probably put together a nice sub-layer. And the reason that I like to do this first, generally speaking, is because it gives me a kind of bed, a predictable bed of sound that I can then go back and layer some cool details on without ever feeling like I'm missing the main element of an engine. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to listen through these, pick some sounds that I like, drag them onto the timeline, and just get started. So let's listen through some of these engine sounds that I heard. This is actually a Tiger sound, so this is not an engine. I thought this would be a cool layer to add in as the ship gets close. But there's some animal sounds I think are a great thing to layer into engines too. So that's also in here. But there's also some other things like this jet ski, I think, build up. Yeah. This is more of a designed element, more of an airy whoosh by. And then this right here, this gravity deep rumble moan, this is a perfect starting place for a sub frequency in this ship, I think. So this is what I'm going to start with. I don't know if you can hear it over my voice. It's a very deep low rumble. So I'm going to drag this onto the timeline, cut it up, and just get a basic shape going for my fade. So I'm not going to have it start right away. I'm going to have it slowly fade in because it is a sub sound, and it only really makes sense that it would catch up to the camera once the ship got very close. So the peak of this sound is going to be right around here. And then after this point, we can have it fade out again. So this sub layer, I'm going to make sure is mono because I don't like to muddy up all my sub with other frequencies. And let's just take a look at this, what this looks like in the EQ. Yeah, so we got 3 major peaks in here. Got a peak around 39 hertz. That's very, very low. A peak around 94, and then another peak around 192. So I kind of think maybe it'd be nice to pitch this up slightly. Yeah, that feels a lot better. Just to get it more in the audible zone. I don't really want the peak. If I see a peak in 39, I'm thinking, well, that's a little too low for the kind of thing I'm doing here. So what's the harm in bringing the whole thing up and maintaining the integrity of the clip? I don't want to try and replace that one frequency or find a new sub to layer in there. It just would muddy the whole thing up. So if I can get away with just pitching something up, I think that works in this clip. I'd actually even fade this in a little later. It seems like the ship is a little too close right from the get-go. That I like. Okay, cool. So now let's take some of these other layers and put them on top. This is a Mustang car pass by. Sync it up generally with this sub layer. We may have to, for example, cut the tail in half because the ship does pass by pretty quickly. So because the car doesn't pass by as fast, we might have to do something like this where we bring the tail a little bit closer just to increase the speed of that pass by as it goes by. Well, let's see what this sounds like. Cool. I like that a lot, actually. Sounds to me like there's a lot of low frequency there. Yeah, there is. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of 100 hertz in this sound, so I might just take this down a little bit so I can turn on Q mode and it's showing me only what this selected band is hearing. Then I find the frequency that distorts out and I just bring it down a little bit. Turn off Q. So now we have something like this. Bring it down even a little bit more. Nice. Now that with the sub-frequency sounds like this. Very cool. All right, so I'm going to leave this tail here. And now let's look at some of the other layers we've got. We've got a jet launch. A really heavy distortion layer. I wonder if this could work maybe fading in much later, sort of when the ship finally passes by. Sort of use it as a detail layer. Let's see what this sounds like in context. I actually even like it way later. I think it could work as a very close detail layer. Let's see what this sounds like. Yeah, nice, cool. Okay, so now let's look through the rest of these. I know we had that designed sort of layer in the tiger chuff as well. Cool, I like these actually a lot. So these kind of sounds, these designed kind of electric arc whooshing sounds. I like these as banking sounds. So when I see the ship make a turn, I like to maybe take these and pitch them down, add them as little like carving through the air sounds. Like you can see right here, the ship sort of changes trajectory. We can use this to add detail, so it's not just a very smooth fade in and fade out over the course of the ship, because, you know, if this just goes and increases in intensity and then flies by, it's cool and it matches with the picture, but adding these little details along the way to keep interest, like when the ship banks or changes direction, that shows that it's like straining to turn a little bit, gives it more of a physical feel. Nice, cool. Let's see what this sounds like in context. Cool, and I'll give one more right after. Nice, cool. Turn that down a little bit. All right, so now we have a few more sounds. Let's see what we can find in here. I know there was this sci-fi one, right? But there's this one as well. Nice. That's very designed, very cool. That I feel like is, you want to get your bass ready before you actually add some of the design elements, and I just think it helps you have a more grounded feel, because if you start from something designed, it's sometimes hard to go from something very designed to something very different, but it's very easy to go from simple sounds to something cool. So that's what we have here. Let's listen to what this sounds like just synced with the clip like this. Cool, I actually like it. I think I'm going to cut a little bit off the tail and bring it a little bit closer, just like we did with the sub. But other than that, I think it's very cool. Fits very well, I think. I might even add just a little bit of auto pan. It actually won't be panning. I'm going to sync the auto pan together, so it actually is just a tremolo effect. It's just turning up and down the volume with it at a given rate. So what the cool thing about this is that I can just show automation and bring in a new lane and just give this a very cool sort of like increasing in intensity tremolo effect as it gets closer. So you'll see the rate start to increase, and you'll hear it sort of wobble at an increasing pace until the ship gets close to us, and then it comes back down again. Nice. So now I will make sure that this does not have any sub-frequencies in it, because I don't want this to clash with our sub. And then I also think this whole engine needs some compression or some love in the mastering department. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to grab a compressor, an OTT, which is kind of where I like to, I know OTT stands for over the top, and it is over the top, but I like the way this is. So for those who don't know, OTT is a multi-band compressor preset found in Ableton, but also a lot of other effects, I think, dating back to old hardware for drum samplers and things like that. I think OTT has been around for much longer than software. But I think it's, generally speaking, it's a multi-band compressor that squashes everything together in a way that brings out almost way too much detail in everything. You hear it a lot in electronic dance music, so this is what it sounds like at 100% on our ship. I'll do an A-B. This is no effects. And then this is with OTT. You can hear that it just really squashes everything. But with an engine like this, something that's very bright and sort of in your face, I like to bring in an OTT and then almost just bring up the amount until I can barely hear it working. like at 10% or so. Nothing crazy, nothing where someone would go, oh my God, this thing is squashed already, or it sounds very compressed, but just something that brings everything together a little bit more. So that's what I'm going to do there. And I'm also going to throw a limiter and just give it some, actually no, I'll use a glue compressor. This is just a very light compressor. I throw it on until I see between 0 and 5 dB of reduction on this compressor. Give it a little bit of makeup gain. Okay, cool. I almost forgot about our tiger chuff sound. I want to add this. So I like these sounds. I think animal sounds work so well in vehicles, and especially in something like this where we have a lot of other elements filling out the spectrum, and we can really make it, give it a little bit more fun detail without actually making the whole thing sound like an animal. We don't have to really worry about someone going, oh, you know, I heard the tiger in that. It sounded strange. Like, we can sort of hide it. So I think this sample works very well. That almost sounds just like the same thing as our auto panned jet ski sound. Listen to the similarity. I mean, that's crazy. So I'm going to take this lion chuff or tiger chuff. I'm going to pitch it down a few semitones. I think it would be cooler if it's a little deeper. Nice. And I think that sync works. Let's see what it sounds like in the clip. Okay, cool. I think that's a great detail layer too. Okay, so now let's see what the engine sounds like just soloed as its own thing. Okay, awesome. So we've got our engine sorted out. Now let's take a look at the lasers. I already took the liberty of sort of mapping out with these basic temp sounds where the lasers are fired, sort of where the loop is going to be. So you can take a look here and see the sync. So I just do that before starting something like this, just so I get a general sense of how many shots I'm going to be putting in and where they're going to be in the timeline, because it can get very messy if you make one shot, for example, and then you try and extrapolate and do, you know, the 7 more shots that you have to do. It can be very messy, and you can run into issues where samples are cutting each other off and you don't get as much variety as you'd want. So I just like to do this first to get an idea of what the map's going to look like. So when I put a new sound in, I can easily make a variation right there. And I'm going to start with these laser sounds that I found in the library. This is basically, Ben Burtt talks a lot about how he used to hit guy wires and hit these antennas with wrenches, and with contact microphones record the sound that bounces back and forth on the wire, and this is what you get. And these are such classic Star Wars sounding twangs that I wanted to use these. I'm going to pitch them up a little bit. You can see that they're very long samples. See how far up I can go without getting a little too ridiculous. So I think roughly that sounds pretty good. I'm going to start cutting these up, give a little bit more space to this one. Let's see what this sounds like. Give a little bit more of the body of the shot. Do that with the next one. I think something roughly like this works pretty well. Nice little crossfade. We get some breathing room. See what they sound like two back to back. It's kind of muddy. It's kind of a little too much slinkiness. So you know what I might do instead is sort of give a bed of these laser shots, maybe do half the frequency, and not frequency in terms of pitch, but frequency in terms of how often these play. Then let those sort of act as the character layer. So now if I do this, let's see what this sounds like with the shots. Need maybe one more at the end here, just because it didn't feel quite long enough to me. Nice. I'm going to group these up. It doesn't have to quite sync. I'm going to name this Slinky. It doesn't quite have to sync because I think instead what I'm going to do is put a deeper, sort of more mechanical sound on top of these that gives them more of a feeling of being shot out specifically at this tempo. But then I can let the Slinky layer just come in as the detail layer and have it be less indicative of, you know, each shot leaving the barrel, and more sort of indicative of the character of the weapon in the first place. So it sounds like this. Again, I'll play it for you. So now I think I'm going to look through here. So these are the sounds that I got from the blasters. I forgot to play those for you, but let me just go through and show you what I selected from the library for these blasters. So you know what I kind of like there is this pinball switch on sound. Let's see what this sounds like duplicated and made into the actual firing mechanism sound. Let's see what this feels like. Roughly take that loop. I'm not trying to get an actual thing, you know, working here, sounding perfect. I'm just going to see what the feel is. I kind of like it with the Slinkies. I think it needs some pitching. So if we join these together in Ableton, keep them warped together so they're not going to go fly off the screen when I pitch them down. So now you can hear we're getting a more mechanical thump out of them than we had before. Go into beats mode, sort of like a drum mode, or sort of something for preserving transients. And I can go use this mode to I can use these transient preservation settings down here to make sure that, you know, in between each transient, I can say what % of that audio do I want to keep playing, or should I fade it out? So when you hear 0, it's very staccato, and then when you are at 100, it's very sort of like long, so you can hear the difference. So I think somewhere in the middle is nice. Let's see what these sounds like pitched down more. Okay, cool. I like that. Let's see what that sounds like. I think we lost some of the high brilliance that was in this sound. Some of the really nice sort of detailed clicky sound at the top of this pinball machine thing. So I'm gonna throw a saturator on there and give it a little crew cut preset. Nice. Okay, cool. So I think that acts as a decent mechanical layer for this sound. And now so if we listen to these together, let's just hear it in the context with the actual engine playing as well. Let's hear what we have and try and balance it a little bit better. So I think it works actually pretty well. I think one thing that I would change, and I'm just going to get rid of this track so we don't have to look at it. One thing that I'm going to change is I might add a little bit of perspective to this whole group. So I might add a proximity plugin. This is a free VST by Tokyo Dawn, I believe it's called. And they do a great job of sort of adding distance to clips. So now it kind of just puts it a little bit further back in the scene. You can hear if I A/B, this is what it sounds like with no effects. And then here's what it sounds like with some more distance on it. I'm actually going to bring it up a little bit more. And now I think what could be cool, now that we have a cool kind of bass layer and mechanical layer going, I think what could be nice is to go in here and repitch our Slinkies. Now that we're just using it as a bass layer, we don't have to worry so much about maintaining the transients like we did when we were first laying them out, and we thought, you know, this is going to be, every shot is going to have its own transient. Now, even cooler, what we could do is duplicate these groups, save one for the high pitch part, like this, and take the same sounds and layer them back with each other, but pitched much lower. Let's hear what these sound like together. Nice. I think that beefs it up really nice, actually. I think I'm going to throw some mild saturation just to glue this all together a little bit more. I think something a little bit softer. I like to start with presets on saturators just because I haven't dug enough into these settings in the Ableton Saturator to really know how to build something from scratch yet. But the presets sound so good often, it's not really necessary. Nice. Okay, so that's our laser layer. And let's hear what, again, these two sound like together. Nice. Okay, cool. So let's move on to the last sound in this design, the explosion. All right, so I think the explosion is going to be the simplest, kind of most fun layer to design here. It's just very straightforward. We just got a moment here, right here, this frame that the explosion really starts. Got a very slight lead in as the ship gets destroyed, and then we just get to have fun and make a cool explosion tail with all the debris. So let me show you the sounds that I found in the core library for explosions that I liked a lot. Cool, so you can hear kind of which ones of those are more debris oriented and which ones are transient oriented for the main explosion. So I'm going to drag all of these right in. I think we can fit all these into a design. I think that would be fun. And I think I'm just going to start with the transient. And you can kind of even see, I mean, if you just glance at these audio clips, you can tell very easily which ones I'm going to be using for what, because they all look exactly like what they sound like. So this first explosion over here, I think works really well. This is a nice transient. I picked this out specifically as the transient for when the ship gets fully destroyed and you see this frame right here, it just falls completely apart. So let's hear what the sync sounds like. I'm actually going to turn the engine and lasers off. Nice. I'm going to get rid of, turn this mono. Just give it a nice little thuddy kind of like, you know, very in your face kind of kick drum sound. Now next we've got this cable stretch sound. Let's see what this sounds like. So in the beginning we have a very sci-fi like sort of pitch down moment, and then in the end we have very nice debris sounds. So I'm going to actually just cut the tail off and use only that as a detail layer as the ship flies apart. And actually I might even use it as a lead-in sound as well, because you can see the debris start to really come off the ship even before the explosion sound happens. So I wonder what this feels like. See what it feels like with the explosion. Nice. Cool. I like that. I'm going to get a little duck going here, just to give the explosion a little bit more punch. I feel like this is a manual way to sort of control the sidechain compression of this sample. Just gives it a nice cadence. Could be cool. Okay, sweet. So now we go in here, add some big cable stretching sounds. Let's see what these sound like, see what parts we want to keep. Nice. Okay, that just straight up sounds like debris falling off the side of a ship. So I'm going to use that as the tail, sort of in line with this cable stretch sound. Might even pitch this up slightly. Nice. Now we've got this artillery explosion, which is a very, oh, that's great. That's a great sound. Just a very thunder. It sounds almost like thunder, really. It sounds like almost exactly like thunder. I think it'll fit very well with the other explosion that we've got in here. But I do want to make sure before I continue that these actually play well together. So one thing that I think actually works better is taking some of the high end out of this explosion and letting the transient be sort of dictated by the other one. I'm going to use this, the thud from this. But I'm going to let this transient ring out. So together more like this. Now that combined with the other layers we have so far sounds like this. Sweet. Okay, cool. Now, actually, I'm going to turn this up as well. And I'm going to turn down these other two layers. Nice. Okay, so now we have this artillery explosion right here. This artillery, I think, acts as a nice little hissy layer right off of the transient of this explosion right here. A lot of like bird-like sounds in this. Very cool. And I think the same thing is going to be true of this other artillery sound down here. Actually, yeah, this artillery sound has a lot of frequencies that I'm hearing in our design already. I think layering it in might be a little too muddy. So I noticed that it actually has this cool lead-in sound back here. I wonder if we can use this before our ship explodes as a way of building into that transient a little bit heavier, a little bit more intensely. Let's see what it feels like. A little fast, but I think the idea is there. Cool, yeah, I think that works. Because we see the ship is sort of tearing apart as as the first few shots hit, and then there's this distinct moment where it completely bursts apart, and then we see the sparks fly and everything. So I kind of would like to use this explosion layer to build into that without having it be sort of like a riser like you'd hear in a trailer sound or something. But I think it adds a nice little extra bit of cadence and detail to this explosion sound. So now we gotta maybe add some OTT to this explosion. I'm going to throw in, I think, just to copy and paste the same effects that we had on the engine as a starting point. Take a little bit of that glue compression off, just because I'd like to have the transient pop out as much as possible. Cool, I think that's a nice little fast explosion design we got there. All right, so finally I want to talk about a little effect that or not effect, but just some automation that I drew onto each group to give it a final sort of manual mastering pass, I guess you could call it. This is something that I've used in dialogue editing before, where you just sort of manually change volume based on little automation lanes and gain, and you do that to, let's say, for example, do some compression without just putting a preset on a voice and just letting it sound like it's using a compressor. Manual compression allows you to sort of think more with your ear, and I've done that with this as well. I think the most important sound in this clip is the explosion, and second most important are the lasers, followed by the engine. And this is just because of the cadence of the whole clip. I think these lasers build up into the explosion, and we want to have that satisfying moment where the explosion peaks out in the mix and feels like a sort of payoff for what the scene is really all about. And then the engine is sort of just in the background of those two sounds. It's like the bed that's giving the whole thing, you know, a track to ride on. So what I've done here is just add some gain automation to each clip. And the first thing I did was duck out the engine slightly when the lasers begin firing. And then as the layers keep firing, the engine slightly comes back up to -1 dB, so almost no difference. And just as the explosion hits, both the lasers and the engine get a big duck in volume to make some room for the engine in the mix. And I've also given a 2 dB little boost to the explosion right in that transient there, just to design that a little bit more. So now here's what the mix sounds like, just these three groups playing together as a whole to this clip. I'll play it through 2 times. You can really hear each element start to peak out a little bit more with this manual automation. It's something that I do a lot and I really like as a technique. So now I think the last thing to do before we call this quits is to just throw on a little bit. I don't think I'll need this saturator in the mastering chain. I do think I want to add a little bit of a sort of an airy reverb, and I'm not talking, you know, something crazy, but not at 100%, but I like adding, you know, 2 or 3% or 4% of a reverb just to give something a little bit more space. And now I'm also going to add this Ozone 9 patch. This is just some basic imaging that I set up beforehand. It's just going to keep our bass in the center and just generally give a small maximizing pass to everything, add some compression. And then finally, actually, I don't think I'll need proximity either. I think everything, we've taken care of the distance sizing within each individual group. So now, again, here's our final ship attack flyby redesign for Star Wars. All right, guys, I think that does it for the design portion of this video. I hope it was instructive for you guys just to see how I work a little bit. I think one of the key elements of how I work generally comes down to setting up my workstation and my sample library and everything that I am going to use in my design to sort of be there ready for me when I go to do the creative part of design. So a huge part of that for me, like the biggest part, is searching for sound effects. And so search is what I've been using to do that lately. It's basically Pro Sound Effects' version of a sample library organizing program or a search engine, and it's a very, very powerful tool. I love it because it sort of allows you to make these custom folders from your sample library that you can go through later and sort of set up your workstation to really work for you. I think it's the best way to approach a design is to have locked and loaded in sort of your ammunition belt a ton of sounds that you think are cool, so that when you're designing, you're not having to go back and forth between you know, your sample library and your editor and your sample library and your editor. It just sort of streamlines the whole process. So I highly recommend, if you haven't had the chance yet to work with a sample library organizer or a search engine or a search program like Search from Pro Sound Effects, I highly recommend recommend giving it a try. It's changed my workflow for the better, and I don't see myself going back to just searching through my DAW anytime soon. So give Search a try. It's a lot of fun, and let me know how it works for you guys. Thanks so much for watching. My name again is Marshall McGee. I'm the host of Waveform on YouTube if you want to check out that show. Today I was using the core standard library from Pro Sound Effects. Again, great sound effects from people like Mark Mangini, Richard King. You're not going to be disappointed with this library. It's full of great stuff, just hundreds of gigs of high quality sounds that you can go to for just about any purpose. So I hope you guys give this sample library a try. I hope you give Search a try. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.